All right. Welcome to the Falcon Forward podcast. This is Peter. I'm here with Mike Tanghe. Excited to kick off the week. We're already week 11 of the year. I count everything by weeks of the year. I don't know why it's a habit. I think it's from the old days of like watching production schedules and okay, that car's getting built or whatever, but flying through. And what a weekend it was. Last week we had I watched the oil and gas stuff very closely, but one headline that caught my eye is that our president Donald Trump steps in and says that he's going to, regardless of what carriers are going to insure the transportation, he's going to make sure that transportation's flowing freely and that they'll insure everything. So, Mike, I read that and I'm like, this is the leading topic of today's show, and then we'll dive into some more marketing, website, all that fun stuff after. But what do you think about our president jumping in there?
Man, again, not to try and get too political on things, but as far as, details, how things have thought up, clearly what the administration's trying to do is what can they do to tamp down gas prices? I read somewhere that I think it's every cent increase in prices is like $187 million per day cost to the American public. Maybe should fact check that one. But anyways, it's a very big, not just, and it's so easily measured, right? Because it's on every corner. So it's a measure of, what type of pain do people feel in their wallets when they're filling things up on it. So, um, if you attack an area in the Middle East and they start attacking their neighbors, which is what we see going on right now, and where 20% of the world's crude goes through every day in a very narrow spot. If that oil stops flowing, then guess what's going to happen to prices that people pay at the pump? Going to go up. So the administration is trying to, what can they do to get oil moving again in that region? So they announced that, and I did a little bit of research on it. Tough to get details.
Mhm.
When they say, hey, we're going to insure, and what I read was a $20 billion rollaway insurance plan for it. But then my questions would be, okay, what, and they said it's a reinsurance plan. So is this covering, if a boat sinks, the cost of these ships is in the hundreds of millions of dollars, not to mention the loads that they're carrying. But are they going to insure the pollution liability? If one of these things sinks, are they going to insure the claims against, so again, if a ship is sunk, there's people on that ship, and if they sue the ship owner and say, again, an attorney in hindsight would be like, you took a ship into a war zone with our crew on it, and now they're dead. I mean, that's a massive liability claim against a business. So I would want to know all those details before I would dare put something into harm's way. It's not just like, oh, President Trump's going to back us up with $20 billion of U.S. money. A lot of details to be hashed out there. And I guess my hope is that this conflict, war, is solved long before any of those details will get set out. So I view it as a PR move, trying to, hey, how can we tamp down prices? The reality is you can't just announce this program and then have it be, oh, it's on, like, oh, I got $20 billion in insurance. Great. That's all I need to know.
What's interesting to me is how easy it is to get a market or something to change with just a statement, right? So without anyone understanding what's the real math behind it. So like JP Morgan was like, there's over 400 tankers right now, right? To insure those, it would be like closer to 350 billion compared to the 20 billion. So I mean, the numbers we're talking are just insane anyways, but it's kind of like I saw Beasley was bought for whatever, like a 10 billion. And I was like, oh, 10 billion is nothing. Like in the insurance world, when you think about how big these companies are and what they do, I mean, the risks that are insuring $1 billion doesn't go as far as they think, right? So anyways, that was a fun way to kind of lead into it. But yeah, so anyways, good start. But I always like to ask you, what are you most excited for this week, or what do you got going on that I guess has you thinking different?
Yeah. So lots of good stuff that's going on this week on the work front. We have just a lot of our prospect opportunities that we're working on. So good stuff on both the personal lines and commercial line side. So keep those things moving along. Got some of our larger renewals pretty much wrapped up, which is also a good feeling as well. I'm excited. I'll be traveling this week, and we'll be visiting one of our interns, Emily Henrik. We're going to go with my daughter and watch her play some rugby at the end of this week. So that's going to be great.
Emily was truly a standout. She was in group 4. So, but yeah, Emily, if you hear this, we remember you, and thank you so much for the hard work you put in. Yeah, and we speaking of the academy, we've got Academy Group 5 started last week. So Nia, John, and James all joined us, and so we've got a lot of movement, a lot of things that are going on. I think one thing that I'm really encouraged by is we sent out an email to all of our rugby connections and said, hey, we got Academy 5 started. Thank you guys for referring people to us and for really being such a supportive group of individuals. The more I spend time around rugby, the more I'm just amazed by the just the positive culture that it is truly, but got responses for every single person. So people have worked with Nia, they've worked with James, they've worked with John, just saying, hey, glad to see them as part of this. And that is such a huge and awesome thing to get in your inbox. So yeah, anyways, welcome Group 5. We'll keep things moving
Shout
into
out
week 2.
Shout out to the women's sevens program for their third place finish in Vancouver last week, and now they're going to be in New York this weekend. So first time New York City is hosting the seven stop, so that'll be cool. Good focus for the city, good focus for rugby in the U.S. Hopefully the women's sevens program can continue their climb up. I think they're third overall in the standings, which is fantastic on it, and be fun to see them even move a little further up the hardware chain on home soil this weekend.
Yeah. Awesome. I'll have to look that up and track it as we go through. But yeah, rugby is definitely a big part of our culture here. Even if you don't play rugby, the rugby spirit is still around you and with you with Falcon West. That's for sure. Awesome. So in terms of growth, this is a conversation that you and I had before we hit record. We've been really working hard at. I mean, this has been a very long tail discussion on marketing and reaching the right people and clients. And one item in particular that I focused on is this sort of how do we get to the right clients? How do we find the people that value or need rather even the support of a broker? And a lot of times, commercial lines, that discussion's more natural, right? We have people that can write the small business, the medium business, the large business, just depending on what they're doing. We have the expertise for that with business. But I think with personal lines, because initially my introduction to insurance was through personal lines, right? Writing home and auto, umbrella, much more of a transactional sort of feel. So if you go back and look at like what I've done in the past, it was very much, sell a car, transactional, retain the client through different metrics, have a good service department, all those things, but very much 0 to 0 every month. Things change. It's very, I think volatile is a tough word, but it can be. So looking at insurance, there's that business model with insurance as well, which is like, look, I need my local search to be dialed in. I need to have good Google reviews. I need to be spending money on advertising to reach those people. And that's great because I think there is a need for that in the market. Certainly there is. Obviously, State Farm and Farmers, Allstate, even some of the carriers we have catered to that type of business. But if you look at Falcon West overall, and this is where I'll kind of lead into it, we definitely talk to probably more of your private client, high net worth, more to protect space, and we have the carriers that are directed towards that more. And so there's sort of this, I wouldn't call it a conflict, but it's hard for me because like I want to be able to go reach everybody. And if I remember, it's like, look, you're going to spend 80% of your time serving, 20% of your clients and vice versa, but we want to cater to the right people. So like, what are your thoughts on approaching, as a business owner? You've been doing this for a long time. What are the benefits, I guess, of going after the mass market versus the private client and vice versa? Like, and really, what is Falcon West like directionally? What do we want to focus on and why? I know that's a loaded question, a very deep question, but I just want to at least kick it off with you.
Yeah, no, it's a great question though, and definitely something that every business needs to ask themselves. When I talk with someone about that's interested in learning more about insurance or just get more detail on what the industry is, if we're meeting in a coffee shop, I'll look out and be like, every single person in this room buys insurance, but maybe one or two of the people in this room, and it could be a couple hundred there would be prospects, would be people who we would target. Doesn't mean that the other people are bad or they're not, but it's what is our organization geared up to do? So how are we structured? And then secondly, like what brings you joy? And so you could be a business that, is, hey, we're spending, 20% of our revenue on marketing, and it's all designed to drive inbound volume, 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 volume. That doesn't bring me joy. What I enjoy is sitting down with someone who is a successful business owner or has assets that they need to protect, that they value what I'm going to tell them, which is, hey, here's how you should structure your program so that if you're the unlucky person that is involved in a messy, large claim, it's not going to, force you to close your business, or it's not going to completely alter your lifestyle. That's what we're geared for. We're geared for people, again, who value that level of insight, of input, and again, will become long-term clients of our organization because that's what we're going to bring to them. We're not going to say, hey, I found a way where you can save a bunch of money and do this, do this, do this. And, the end result will be leaving themselves massively exposed. Pricing is always important, don't get me wrong, but we're never going to lead with, hey, how can I save you money? How can I save you? That's not it. It's, hey, let's have a conversation about what you're doing and how you can adequately protect that. And then it's up to you how much you spend on that. And we'll have fair pricing for it. But, the most important thing is you have stuff you need to cover, and we'll offer you solutions on how best to do that.
Totally. When I started, so I've shared this story many times, and I don't know if I've done it here on the podcast, but I've had Travelers has been my auto insurance carrier for 15 years. I mean, I think ever since I've started driving and checked rates, I'm not like I'm going to do my due diligence and make sure that, but they've always been great. And whenever I need something, they pick up the phone. If I was going to pick a brand that I like Travelers, right? For whatever reason, if I was going to, wear a logo for a carrier. But what's interesting to me is, so it was placed through a State Farm broker. Or no, it wasn't a State Farm broker. He had access to him or whatever, but placed me with them. And I never reviewed my coverage. So start with Falcon West. I'm like, hey, great. I got a policy right here I can go through and kind of learn on a little bit. So start going through it, and I was carrying the typical limits. And then, you start getting into what's uninsured motorist. And no one had ever had that discussion with me. It wasn't even, I didn't know the difference between the two. I just knew, here's what I'm paying every month. Here's my deductible. There you go. And if I got a cracked windshield, call in. Oh yeah, great. Download the app, take a picture. They'll come out and take care of it. That was kind of the extent of it. But so anyway, start learning about this, and I'm like, uninsured motorist is a huge thing. I'm like, this is not good. That I have 2 kids, my wife, driving 20,000 miles a year, and there's 1 out of every, I think, 4 drivers now in California is underinsured or uninsured. Like that's the newest number, and I'm like, that's not great. So of course, increase my limit, on my regular policy. And then I'm like, okay, I need to I need to see if there's more. So then you start thinking umbrella, right? And there's all these things that you don't think about that you sort of need to, that I just wish someone would talk to me about it, right? I mean, I was younger, I was in my 20s, probably wasn't that big of a deal, just me and my wife driving around, no big, but now I have kids, and I think through like their future and like, what does that look like? And if something happens to me, like there's so many more things that kind of come up. And do you spend more on it? Yes. But am I not just sleeping better, but am I sitting here knowing that my wife and kids are in a better position as they're driving around and doing all? Yes. Like that is the part that I think is critical. And not everyone's great at relaying that. Like if you told me to go sell a home and auto policy, I could have a educated discussion with you, but there's some people that are just better at sharing like what the implications are. And my focus is more on the commercial side, right? But again, the personalized discussion needs to be had. So it's something noted down here, and I don't know if this is true or not, but is it true that Falcon West at one point opted out of advertising in the Yellow Pages? Is that a true story?
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of goes back to that example in the coffee shop that everyone there buys insurance. Not everyone is our customer. Um, and so what we'd found was, that if people were seeking us out just by open up the Yellow Pages, and for those who don't know what the Yellow Pages were, it was a really big book that would come and have a bunch of businesses in there. And if you were looking up someone, you would open up the Yellow Pages and find that business. But those types of inbound calls weren't really our target market. And while in theory we could have sold those people insurance, they weren't typically looking for something that we provided. And so we found it better to not be in those organizations or in those publications, because it just ended up not being a good use of our time when we instead could be using that time to reach out to people through centers of influence and educating them on why these things are important that we would recommend.
Yeah. When you mention the yellow pages, I just think of that scene in The Office where Dwight is like, the white pages is the white whale, right? You don't need them, you don't want them, but if you're the paper salesman that gets that account, you're retired for life.
I remember, I mean, again, dating myself when these private equity companies were paying billions of dollars to acquire yellow pages,
Crazy.
these businesses from like the phone companies. And just even at the time, I was like, man, I know all I do is take it and then take it immediately to you. You know, you walk out to your doorstep and it'd be like this wall built in front of you with 4 or 5 of these publications, and they just go right to their recycling bin.
Right, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, we'd get them out in the middle of the country, like live way countryside, and you'd still like every year. I remember hauling that up,
It'd actually be kind of funny to get your older one of those and just like have it sitting out for like if your kid's like, oh, what are we going to eat tonight? Well, let's open up the yellow pages.
So last topic, we've been talking a lot with commercial clients about MVRs and so motor vehicle records. And obviously these are really important for companies to like know who's behind the wheel. But in some cases, we find that companies aren't always running these or they don't have access to them or for whatever reason, they're just not interested in doing because it is more administrative. But from a carrier's perspective, from an underwriter's perspective, could you maybe walk us through why those are important besides the obvious maybe and I guess how to navigate that a little bit more as a broker having that conversation.
Yeah, so this is something that will come up quite frequently, and especially with businesses that have grown quite a bit. So MVRs, what is it? It's a motor vehicle record. So it's just a record of what your employees' driving background has been. So do they have violations? Do they have accidents, tickets, those types of things? And then what types of accidents, tickets, or violations? Were they at fault, not at fault? Were they distracted driving? And the reason why they're important is, accidents will happen. And if you have two identical accidents where there was a serious injury involved, where your driver, your employee was at fault causing this accident. And let's just say they hit a family of 4 with serious injuries. And in the perverse world of insurance in our tort system, it's actually much more expensive to injure someone than it is to kill them, which is kind of a gloomy or odd stat. But an accident with serious injuries. And the reason why is a person could require a lifetime of care, and that could be, for 30, 40 years on it. If you have, and if you think about it, if your business is involved in a bad accident, hopefully you'll have insurance. And then hopefully you'll have adequate limits of insurance. And all that is doing, it's not changing the fact there was an accident. It's not going to change the necessary outcome of that accident, but it's just going to provide a wall. So the insurance effectively becomes your bank, someone lending you or giving you money that you've paid for by premiums for whatever decision gets handed down by a jury or judge. Hopefully not a jury, because it's juries are not as kind to businesses as a judge may be. So in that incident where you have identical accidents, same injuries involved, and in the first scenario you have a driver with a clean MVR, then let's say that accident will settle for $2, $3, $4 million. And just pick whatever number you want. If you have an identical accident, your driver was at fault, your employee was at fault, but when they do their discovery, they find out that this person had a suspended license, or this person had multiple DWIs, or this person had a history of being ticketed for distracted driving. If they were doing that same thing, like let's say it was a distracted driving incident, they're looking at their phone and they've been ticketed multiple times for that same incident, that same accident, now if that gets in front of a jury, I mean, it's going to be like a 5 to 6 times multiplier for the damages in that claim, because you as an employer have a fiduciary responsibility to protect your people, to protect the public. There's a tool out there that you can use to screen people. Are they responsible drivers? And that tool is motor vehicle checks. If you weren't doing those checks and you have that person come back in that second scenario, it's going to be really, 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 really terrible. Obviously terrible because people are injured. Getting past that, it's going to be terrible for your company. And then terrible in turn for the insurance company that is providing that wall between you. So MVRs. So if you're a smaller business, it's just insurance companies, they're going to basically do the cost benefit and say, hey, they should have this, but we're not going to mandate it just because it's going to be too much work for them to do. we don't have enough premium to do this. Maybe we're not providing this high limits. But if you're a larger organization, and this is a conversation we frequently have with our prospects and clients as they grow, because one of the joys about what we get to do is we get to consult with people of a company that's starting out versus a company that's been around for 10 or 20 years are going to have drastically different risk profiles and risk management procedures, is talking to them about the importance of this. And so it is something that all businesses should be doing, but it just becomes one of those that if you're a certain size business or you're getting a certain limit of insurance from an insurance company, they'll mandate, say, hey, we'll give you insurance in exchange for you doing this particular step. And that's not the only thing that they'll require, but that is a very common one, especially if it's a heavier driving exposure. And a business can be like, well, I don't own any vehicles. Sure, but do your employees rent cars? Do your employees drive their own cars? That business has a liability risk in either of those situations as well.
The hired and non-known side of it, yeah. And I know, like, we as a brokerage, we're set up to help facilitate that. Depending on all that stuff, we can have that conversation, but it's definitely something that's common. So I love hearing your explanation of it. I think you've probably done it. You could probably do it in your sleep, but it's a great way to kind of frame it and think through it in terms of risk and how that all works out. So definitely worth it. I know we ran we had to run MVRs like everything. I mean, we were running them all the time. It was just a constant, okay, we got to just keep running them. In the car world, it's obviously it's a big risk there. So
Right.
even then, you don't know what happens. Yeah, it's crazy. So, all right, Mike. Well, I know we both have very busy days ahead. Excited to kind of keep things moving there. But thank you for taking the time out of your schedule and traveling. And say hello to Emily for me.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks for everything, Peter. Enjoyed the conversation as always, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Mike. Bye. Falcon Forward does not provide financial or insurance advice. The following disclosure is available at falconwest.com/privacy-policy. All information provided is for educational and entertainment purposes only. We encourage you to do your own research and consult with qualified professionals regarding your specific needs. If you have specific questions about your property and casualty insurance, our contact information can be found at falconwest.com. This content expresses the views of Falcon West Insurance Brokers, Inc. as of the date indicated, and such views are subject to change without notice. Falcon West has no duty or obligation to update the information contained herein. Further, Falcon West makes no representation, and it should not be assumed that past insurance market conditions, coverage terms, or pricing are an indication of future results. This information is being made available for educational purposes only and should not be used as a substitute for insurance advice tailored to your specific circumstances. The information contained herein does not constitute and should not be construed as an offering of insurance coverage, a guarantee of coverage terms, or a binding quote in any jurisdiction. Certain information contained herein concerning insurance markets, industry trends, and risk performance is based on or derived from information provided by independent third-party sources. Falcon West Insurance Brokers, Inc. believes that the sources from which such information has been obtained are reliable. However, it cannot guarantee the accuracy of such information and has not independently verified the accuracy or completeness of such information or the assumptions on which information is based. This content, including the information contained herein, may not be copied, reproduced, republished, or posted in whole or in part in any form without the prior written consent of Falcon West Insurance Brokers, Inc. To obtain our property and casualty license information, please visit falconwest.com. Our California license number is 0616640.